What's up, Windwalkers? What's better than 8 videos with 1 boss kill? How about 1 video with 8 boss kills? With all the news flooding in about the new season, we're getting close to the closing stages of Season 1. I've had tons of requests for updated guides to boss encounters as the seasons progressed, so I decided that I'd make one final guide for Nerub'ar Palace, but this time it was go big or go home. This reset my guild incentive cleared the raid, and I did pretty damn well, managing to get an all-star rating of 9. Utilising the new talent builds and rocking max item level gear, this is the final guide for every boss that I hope will help you as this season wraps up. Whether it's going for a cutting edge on Ansurek, downing a boss you're 200 pulls deep on, or even just getting some of your first mythic kills, don't worry, I've got you covered. So, without further ado, let's kick things off with Ulgrax the Devourer. So, with every boss, I'll put the talents up first, and if there's anything interesting to say about them, I'll use this time, otherwise they're pretty standard. For Ulgrax, however, the talents are quite interesting. With the new changes to Warcraft logs, add damage no longer counts. Now, this is a little controversial, and I lean to the side where I think the ads should count, but that's a topic for another day. So, if you're going for a full-on DPS pass on this boss, you want to go pure single target. However, if you are progressing, I would still recommend going AoE because the ads can pack a punch, and you want to get through that phase as easily as possible. So, Ulgrax the Devourer, the first boss in the raid, and of course one of the easier bosses. So, what I like to do here is Tiger's Lust into the fight, so I get there quick, and then I like to use my transmitter and use my full single target opener to get as much damage as possible. You might notice that I use Touch of Karma here as well before his big AoE. That should just get as much damage out as possible. So on Mythic difficulty, you do not want to touch any of these webs on the floor. If you do that, you'll be stunned for about 30 seconds, and that's about it. Until someone gets you out, and good luck getting someone to get you out. But you can destroy these webs just as you can on the other difficulties with the green circle and having it pop near enough to them. So what's interesting about this fight is cooldown usage. You'll see that I'm actually in the second AoE soak. Because of this, I use Storm, Earth and Fire in the time that the first people are getting soaked in. This is one of those bosses that are quite interesting, and your DPS cooldowns are going to be based on which group you're in. So you can see that I popped Storm, Earth and Fire here, and that's because I wasn't pulled in first. So I want to use it during this period where people are being pulled in. Because if I use it later, say about now, and I'm going to get pulled in, then I'm going to lose a lot of my DPS. So it's just playing the rotation really standard. So you can see that I'm in group 2 and I'm going to go into this big soak here. I want to get as much DPS in as possible, so I jump in at the last second. A lot of people use the portal here. We're Windwalker Monks. We have as much mobility as you can on this game. So just one flying serpent kick and maybe a roll or two and you're absolutely fine. So now he's going to go into his second phase. What you want to do here is as much damage as possible to him as he's going into the phase. Even when he goes down into this purple circle, you can still damage him, so don't stop, keep hitting that boy. So this is where things differ. If you're going the AoE build, you want to use Zuin here, and you want to use Storm, Earth and Fire to kill these ads as fast as possible. However, with the new single target build, you don't want to use any of those cooldowns here. You still want to kill these ads, you know, they do need to die, but you basically play this entire phase without that. So you can see that I'm still using Fist Fury, I'm still using Whirling Dragon Punch. I am still killing stuff here and hitting stuff hard, but I'm not using my major cooldowns as I'm going to be using them on the boss to get as much damage on them as possible. So because of this, you'll see that I double stack Storm, Earth and Fire here. It's not the end of the world because all of that's going into the boss. I do use Touch of Death here on the last ad, and I debate if that was worth it. I think it is. That means I'm going to get that 5% damage amp on the boss during my major cooldowns. So I pop all my major cooldowns, Treacherous Transmitter, and I go absolutely ham on this boss. Because we're so far into this raid, we've got so many buffs and high item level, this guy's going to drop extremely fast. Because I'm group 2 on the pull, I know that I'm not going to get pulled in again. So the moment my Storm, Earth and Fire finishes, I'm going to pop it again. If you find yourself in a position where you're stood on top of someone that has the acid circle, just pop a defensive. Diffuse Magic will negate the entire thing. You know, Touch of Karma will also negate it and bounce back damage to Ulgrax, which is great. You can see that this is a really rather simple fight, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. If not, don't be afraid of this one. This is really chill. There's not many mechanics to it. And really what you want to do is just absolutely slap this boss into oblivion. I've used all my cooldowns at this point, and the second charge is going to come in a second, but we're not going to get it because we're just absolutely dominating him. I don't get another Touch of Death, so I think the toss-up here by using Touch of Death on an ad before that second phase was worth it. This is the damage breakdown for Ulgrax. You can see where all the main damage came from. Now, let's move on to boss number 2. The Bloodbound Horror. So, talent-wise, it's very similar to Ulgrax the Devourer, where, as the tier's gone on, the ad phase is not as important as it once was. Those ads will drop extremely fast, so it's actually better to run single target here if you are high item level, as most of your damage is going to be on the Bloodbound Horror, and there's a good chance you're not going to get all of the ad phases. However, once again, if you are progressing this boss, I would recommend going AoE here, as you are going to get all the ad phases, and they do need to die. So with the Bloodbound Horror, like any boss, you're going to start with your full single target opener, and you're going to pop all your cooldowns. So, similar to Ulgrax, when you use Storm, Earth and Fire is going to depend on what group you're in. There's a 50-50 chance you're going to go down first. I was not in the group that goes down first here to deal with the ads. So that means I'm going to be holding Storm, Earth and Fire until I do go down, which is going to be in a little bit. If I had gone down with Group 1, which is RNG dependent, what would happen then is I would have used Storm, Earth and Fire the moment I went down again, and then I wouldn't use it again until we get past the intermission part. So this fight is pretty simple for a DPS in terms of what to do. It's a very tank dependent fight and how they position the boss to deal with these beams. Otherwise, all you really got to manage are these circles that come in and the tentacles that come out as well. So when you get a tentacle, what you want to do is be dodging all of these like I'm doing here. Do not get hit by any of these. They will pack a punch, especially at lower item level. And when the purple circles come in, what you can do as well is pop a defensive there, because there's no other time really that you will be popping defensives. So as you can see, my Storm, Earth and Fire is about to double cap, and that's because I just do not want to use it at all until we go down. I get purple circles here, so I pop Diffuse Magic to keep myself up, stand in the cone, and get ready to pop my cooldowns now on these ads. So find the closest ad, or the ad that you've been told to target, and pop Storm, Earth and Fire, and then you want to be doing AoE damage here. Now, even though we are a single target build, AoE damage is still possible here, and you're predominantly going to be doing it through Fist of Fury rather than Spinning Crane Kick. Whirling Dragon Punch will also be one that you use. Using Touch of Death on one of these ads as well is really useful, because that means you're going to get the damage jam on the Bloodbound Horror for when you're continuing your single target. So I do it on this small ad here and get ready to hit the boss again, but we're about to go into the intermission, so I'm not going to pop another Storm, Earth and Fire. I'm going to use all my cooldowns when we come out from the intermission part. Really, this is a very straightforward fight. You can see this is what I class as the intermission part, where you run away. You can get a little bit of extra damage in there, but it's safer just to move out early. And then you come in and you pop everything. So you can see why I say that single target's the best here, because we're not even going to get a second set of ad phases for anyone. This boss is absolutely dropping. If you are doing progress though, there is a good chance you're going to get both sets, and AoE is the way forward. This is the damage breakdown for the Bloodbound Horror. Now, let's move on to boss number 3. Sikran, our first real single target boss. I say real in the sense that it's been a single target fight since its conception, and nothing major really has changed with what talents you go for this boss since the tier started all those months ago. So I'm not going to go too much in depth on the talents here. It's cookie cutter single target. Any guesses to what we're doing on pull here? Ding 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 to anyone that said single target opener, as you'll do on every single boss in this raid except for one, but we'll get to that a bit later. So we're going absolutely ham on pull here, and we're kind of praying that we're not the person that's going to get targeted by the first phase lunge. If you are, your DPS is unfortunately going to suffer, as it is during Lust and your big damage windows. Luckily, I didn't get targeted. Good RNG for once in my life. You don't want to stand next to anybody who gets hit by these phase lunges, but you do want to try roll in on the last target so you can get uptime on Sikran as fast as possible. When the swirlies come in, dodge them. You can pop Touch of Karma here if you're a greedy goblin like me and get hit by one just to get some extra damage in. But if you're progressing this boss, I really don't advise it. So as the boss progresses, you're going to do these phase lunges, take them out to the edge, and you're either going to go clockwise or counterclockwise. I'll go over phase lunge a little bit more when I get it during this fight. So how do you want to use cooldowns here? I find that the best time to use your second Storm, Earth and Fire is just after his second phase lunge. It lines up well with Strike of the Windlord and your other major cooldowns, and there isn't too much going on during this window other than a rain of arrows at the very end. So I get phase lunge here, and what you don't want is any other person inside of your circle, otherwise it's going to be a wipe. So I try to get to the very edge of the platform to assert where I'm going to be standing and get them outside of my circle. Luckily they react in time and nothing bad happens. So you can see Decimate came in and we did not pop as many as we would have liked to pop, which means we're going to take a lot of damage. What we're going to do now is he's going to do his big AoE, where he pops all of the clones that haven't been popped. As we've been a bit poor on our Decimates, we are going to take a lot of AoE damage here. I don't have any defenses up for this, but I have a health pot and a health stone, so I'm not too concerned if I drop below here. But if you're progressing, I would advise holding a defensive for this. So what I like to do is after this phase lunge, right after his big AoE, this is when I'm going to pop all my cooldowns, as there isn't a lot going on. Zuin, Storm, Earth and Fire, and I'm just going to go absolutely ham on this boss again.
Collect or stand in circle.
It's kind of a tank and spank where you'll get a mechanic once every so often. Sometimes you don't get a mechanic at all if you're lucky. I think I only get one once in this fight, maybe twice. I don't quite remember. My memory is awful. So we have one more Storm, Earth and Fire up for this fight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for Touch of Death before I use that, so that I get the damage amp out on the last little bit. So I see Touch of Death comes out, so I instantly Storm, Earth and Fire, Touch of Death, and then go back into my massive rotation to get as much damage on this boss as possible as I can. And because we're such high item level, we're actually going to skip like the very end of this fight. I don't even think we get the next AoE, but there is a good chance you will get another AoE if you're progressing this fight and you just want to keep defenses up and play it safe. Otherwise, a rather simple fight once you're used to the Decimate and the clone mechanic. Right on cue, here's the damage breakdown for Sikran. Let's move on to boss number 4. Rasha'nan, everybody's favourite dungeon turned raid boss. Now, Rasha'nan's an interesting one with talent. It's kind of similar to Ulgrax and the Bloodbound Horror, where you can either go single target or AoE, depending on how fast you kill the ads and really how fast you take down the boss itself. In this instance, I went AoE, and it's predominantly what people go, but as I was doing the boss, I kind of felt like the ads were dropping so quickly that single target was a super viable option. So my recommendation for this would be, if you're progressing Rasha'nan, go AoE, as the ads do need to die and it is really good damage. However, on my next takedown of this boss, I probably will be going single target. Anyway, let's get straight into it. Repeat after me. I will do my single target open on Rasha'nan and bash his head in. So we open up, single target, obviously. And what I like to do as well here is at the start of this fight, he does cast a big AoE damage. So if you touch a Karma before that comes in, you should negate the whole thing and reflect a lot of damage back to him. So there are a few main mechanics to this fight. One's the big web circles that come in every so often. If you get one of those, you need to move into a position that's already been predetermined or talked about with your raid. So one of the main reasons that AoE is so good here is the ad sets, but you can see also how quickly they actually get destroyed. I barely managed to get any damage off of them. That's why I really consider single target here. Once these webs come in, move left or right, depending on where you've previously put the web circles. And now we're going to get set up for our movement. We don't pop another Storm, Earth and Fire here. We're going to wait for him to travel first so that we can get the most value as possible. And I'll go over that after we move. So regardless of which side he goes through, go through the portal and use all your movement abilities. You'll be the first one to get there because you're a Windwalker Monk. Now you can see Storm, Earth and Fire is coming for cooldown, but actually, I like to save it for the last second. So I like to Rising Sun Kick and then Storm, Earth and Fire, even if I'm on 2 stacks for a little bit longer. The main reason for this is ads. I want my Storm, Earth and Fire running for when these guys come in, so I can get as much damage as possible with my AoE build. But once again, they get absolutely nuked. So how much damage did I really do there? Otherwise, we're just playing it normally, and we're going to get some more massive web circles. So I get one of these mechanics and I'm to move to the left. We kind of stack up really poorly here, so what I do at the last second is pop Fortifying Brew and Touch of Karma. That way I take barely any damage and I reflect all back. And then at the last second before the waves come in, I dash back into the group once the webs are broken. Play it safe and make sure you use any big defenses you have. If you get those massive web circles, they will be the death of you. Now really, you don't want to be walking over all of these acid pools here, but I'm a greedy goblin. I like to use Zuin and all my major cooldowns at this point here, when he's about to come down as they all come back up, and go absolutely ham on the boss before any of the major mechanics come in, so I can get a big damage window without having to worry about anything too much. So, waves come in here, we're not targeted by those, but if you're the player on the right hand side, you want to go as far as possible out to give all these players that get the web as much room as they can, because this is one of the biggest hitting webs in the entire run, and if you are one of these players and you don't have a defensive, you're gonna die. So, strands come in again, and who gets it? Oh, look, it's me. And do I have any defenses for this? Absolutely not. So I make sure I'm not stood on anyone, and then I move back in. I make sure to use a health potion as well here because I don't have any defensives, and I manage to survive just fine. The last thing you want to be doing is double stacking. If you have no defensives, you will just perish instantly. So you can see how low this boss actually is because of how high our item level is and how many buffs we have at this point in the raid. It's absolutely crazy that he's dying at this stage. So I pop Storm Earth Fire as soon as possible here because I know that we aren't going to get much more of this fight left and I want to get this major cooldown out. And then I just go absolutely ham on the boss while we finish him off. But really, this is a super fast fight. If you're progressing this boss, you're more than likely going to see Rasha'nan go up and down the platform a few more times. If that happens, you're going to pop Zuin on the next time he goes down the platform, as well as Storm, Earth and Fire, kind of similar how we did set 1. And then hopefully the boss should be finished for you. Let's check out the damage breakdown for Rasha'nan then, and move on to the harder bosses in this raid. Broodtwister Ovi'nax, one of my more heavily requested boss takedowns for a new guide. In my initial boss video for this, I used the Celestial Conduit build, which was a little bit of a cheat. This is an updated version of the Shadowpan Windwalker Monk and how to play Ovi'nax, with all the changes since last time. Talent-wise, it's an interesting one. I've seen many different AoE variations of talents that you can use for this. I personally just like using the standard AoE Cookie Cutter build that we've been using since the start of the War Within. However, I've seen variations of people using the Mythic Plus talents for this boss. It really depends on what you feel most comfortable playing in AoE, and if you are progressing this boss, I would recommend using the build that I'm using, as I think it's the most friendliest to get used to on this boss, especially as there's a ton going on in this encounter that you need to be keeping a tab on, otherwise you're more than likely going to wipe. Anyway, let's get to it. Ovi'nax is one of the longer bosses in this raid. No matter how far your guild has progressed, if you're doing re-clears or progression, it is a really long boss fight and cooldown management is rather important. So what I like to do on pull is the single target opener, as we've done on every single boss so far, and then things get a little bit spicy. The main mechanic of Ovi'nax is breaking these eggs in the right order, otherwise you're going to wipe. If you don't get an egg break, you're more than likely going to have to reset the boss. So it is very punishing, and there's a lot of personal responsibility on this boss, so getting it right is very important. Throughout the entire fight, there are going to be swirlies, as you can see, that land on the floor. If you're progressing this boss, these swirlies are probably going to one-shot you. So you can see we have egg breaks, and we all have different markers for colors that we're going to. I have yellow here, and I'm popping these two. You do need to stand in very specific spots to make sure you hit both of them. And now we're going to use Storm, Earth and Fire on all of these adds and do massive AoE. Unlike a lot of classes, our AoE is very highly capped, so we're never going to top the meters on this fight. However, if you ever see yourself in the top 10 DPS on this boss, you're already one step in the right direction. It's also very important to be touch of deathing any of the small adds whenever possible, as this is going to give you a 5% damage increase for 30 seconds consistently throughout the fight. Make sure you're doing it. Another thing with this boss is the pre-spreading before the web, so you need to see if you're going to get a web. So if you get a web on yourself, you need to move outside of the group, like that player just did there, and then you either call for a dispel or you can remove it yourself with Tiger's Lust. So here I get no egg breaks, which is fine, and what I'm going to do here instead is get ready to go AoE. So I Storm, Earth and Fire again, and then I start spinning some wind. Spins and Fists of Fury are your best friend during these situations, and you want to be using them as much as possible. Rising Sun Kick should be used as a way to get your cooldown of Fists of Fury back up as soon as possible. So you're moving on to the third set now, and it looks like we're not going to have our Storm, Earth and Fire cooldown for this. You'd be wrong. As long as you're pressing your buttons and using a lot of chi, you are going to get Storm, Earth and Fire for this and line it up with Zuin here, and you're going to do a lot of damage. I'm about to get another egg break here. I get purple this time, so you need to find out where this egg is and stand next to it, ready to pop. I then also pop a defensive because I'm stood on top of a swirly, but I can't move out of the egg. If I move out of the egg, we're going to wipe. So if you are going to get hit by a swirly whilst you're next to an egg, make sure that you pop a defensive or have one ready. Whilst all of that was going on, I did pop my transmitter, my Zuin, and my Storm, Earth and Fire to make sure I get as much damage on the ads and Ovi'nax as possible. Even though you're having to pop defensives and micromanage movement, you still need to make sure that you're popping all of your offensive cooldowns at the right time. It's a little bit of downtime here, a little bit of chillaxing, a breather before you have to do the whole thing over again in the next zone. What your tanks can do is they can pull Ovi'nax a bit further so he has longer to run, gives you a bit more time to do damage. And now you're just setting up again. I tend to like to use diffuse magic during this part, so you take a bit less damage. But I did have to use diffuse magic earlier when I was stood in a swirly, so I don't have it up. It's not the end of the world, just don't get hit by swirlies. Here, no egg breaks, perfect. I'm going to use Storm, Earth and Fire again here, and then just go massive AoE. Make sure you're not stood inside of anyone's webs, and make sure you're always looking out for swirlies. If you get hit by a double stack out of nowhere, even at my item level, I'm probably going to get one shot. You can see that I also use Touch of Death here on this spider. That means I'm going to get a lot more damage on Ovi'nax throughout this fight. And now we're moving on to the next set location. This fight is very fast-paced and there's a lot going on at all times. You are going to get mechanics on this fight and you need to be aware of that. You can't have the mindset of letting other players do it for you, as that's just not going to happen. You're not going to have that situation here. So you might think that I'd hold Zuin here because I don't have Storm, Earth and Fire up, but actually because the boss is at such a low health for where we are in the fight, I use Zuin and my transmitter and kind of line up with Strike of the Windlord, so that way I get all of my Mark of the Crane stacks up the spinning crane kick, and I do a ton of damage. It's not the end of the world that I don't line the two cooldowns up here, because we're going to finish the fight super fast. If you're on progress, you're more than likely not going to finish this boss fight where we finish this boss fight, so it could be ideal holding Zuin here and using it on this next egg set that we're about to do. This is going to be our final egg set that we do because we're pushing this boss so fast, and I am going to use Storm, Earth and Fire here. Because I have a Storm, Earth and Fire up, I don't need to hold Strike of the Windlord. I can just put that straight into the boss. If you don't have a Storm, Earth and Fire up for an egg set at any point, try and hold Strike of the Windlord so that you can easily get as many Mark of the Crane stacks as fast as possible. So I use Storm, Earth and Fire the moment the ads all come up, instantly get 5 stacks, and now I can start spinning to win and fist furying everything. I also managed to get a Touch of Death on Ovi'nax, which ramps up my damage during all of this, and it's basically just an AoE cluster. We're getting into the very end of the fight here, and I'm only going to get one more Storm, Earth and Fire off. I use it now, and I use my transmitter as well, because I know I'm not going to get another Zuin, and it would be a waste of a trinket to not use it at this point. So he's going to die on the run over. What's going to happen if you're doing progress on this boss still is that there's going to be a lot more egg breaks still to come. So you wouldn't Storm, Earth and Fire here. You'd actually hold it for the next egg set that comes up, and maybe even hold it for when you next have Zuin. You're more than likely going to have to do, at minimum, 2 more egg sets, and in those egg sets, interrupts are the most important thing. So even if you're not assigned an interrupt, like I wasn't assigned an interrupt because we have a lot of range for this fight, you need to make sure that you're ready to interrupt the caster ads, because if any of those casts go out, it's a wipe at the very end when you could have got a kill. So that's Broodtwister Ovi'nax in a nutshell, and that's how you play it on Shadowpan. Let's have a look at the damage breakdown. Not too shabby. Moving on to boss number 6. Nexus Princess Ky'veza. My favourite single target fight in the entire raid, albeit there only being 2. It's extremely fun and extremely punishing. Talent wise for this one, There isn't much variation, kind of like Sikran, it's fully single target, and this build is going to be your go-to. There's a couple of talents here and there that you can change, but I'd recommend using this build that I'm using, whether you killed this boss 5 times already, or you're currently progressing it, or about to progress it. These are the talents you're going to want to take. Before we get into this boss, I want to talk about cooldowns, and this is going to apply to the next 3 bosses. It's really important. On the right hand side of my screen, you can now see a list of all of the major cooldowns and when I plan to use them during the fight. For Nexus Princess, defensive cooldowns are absolutely everything. If I have a time for when I want to pop a defensive cooldown on this list, it is a very fixed time, and I don't want to be popping it at any other time in the fight. If I do that, there's a high chance I'm just going to die because of how defensive management works on this fight. The only defensive that I have lenience with is Touch of Karma, which I don't have a set time, and I'll use Touch of Karma whenever I'm targeted by the dash mechanic because it hits like a truck. Otherwise, Fortifying Brew and Diffuse Magic have set times in the fight, and the only time you would ever press them early is if you are literally going to die because you don't. Okay, let's check out the fight then. Surprise, surprise, if it isn't another single target opener on pull. Now, Ky'veza is an interesting fight, in that the first 30 seconds of the fight are the most chill 30 seconds in any boss fight that you're ever going to do. This is predominantly because you're melee. Ranged players, it sucks for, and you can see that they're having to set up where these shadows go. As a melee, we don't have to worry about that. We're not targeted by that. Not our problem. So you're fully focusing on DPS until the marker dash is coming in, and then you stop thinking about DPS completely, and you're on marker dashes. Now, the way we do it on this fight is if you're targeted by one of these dashes, you need to position yourself exactly on one of these markers that are 2 away. So as you can see, I'm targeted by the one that's on orange, so I need to stand on purple marker. I cannot stand anywhere else. If I do, it messes the entire pattern up. I also then use Touch of Karma instantly on the boss before I get hit by the ability. That way, I reflect the entire damage back. In my opinion, the best time to use Storm, Earth and Fire outside of Zuin windows is during the portals, right in between the 2 dash mechanics. The main reason for this is that it's the biggest amount of downtime, there are no lines coming out through the floor that you have to dodge, it's just kind of relaxing, so it means you can get as much damage out as possible in that time window. Now, when you don't have a dash mechanic on me, like in this set, you need to make sure that you do not get hit by any of these dagger lines. If you get hit by a dagger line, you're dead. It will one-shot you, no matter how high item level you are. This fight is extremely punishing, and we haven't even got to the intermission. The intermission is hell on earth. You're going to have to dodge these pizza slices, and you're going to have to use defenses for these lines just to stay alive. And this is what I mean by defensive management. The moment I can use Fortifying Brew on my timer, that's when I do. And that's because I've allowed enough time for that to last the entire rest of this window so I don't die. The same with Diffuse Magic. I don't pop Diffuse Magic until I've allowed myself to. Otherwise, if I get hit like I just did there by like 3 things at once, I'm a dead man. Because I've set my defensive timers up to exactly the perfect time to last for the entire end of that intermission, I survive. Anyway, you finish the intermission, and that's when you pop all of your cooldowns. It's the perfect time. Just like the start of the fight, it's nice and relaxing, unless you're a ranged player. Unlucky. So, now it is pretty much just rinse and repeat. The fight is the exact same, and it happens 3 times over, until it hits a hardened rage. So, we're looking out for the marker dashes again. We're prepared to move the moment we get one of these. So, I don't get one of them. I'm lucky. So, in my mind, what I'm thinking about now is I'm probably going to get one on the next set of marker dashes. Because if you've been hit by one marker dash in a set, you're not going to be hit by another. Just bear that in mind. If you're hit by the first one, you're not going to be hit by the other. If you're not hit by the first one, there's a high chance you're going to be hit by the next one. Anyway, so now the portals come up again. So what do? I Storm, Earth and Fire. This is the perfect time to do it. There's a lot of downtime. You're going to get as much damage out as possible here. So, dash is coming out again, and I am blessed. My RNG is absolutely perfect. I have won the lottery here because I'm one of the 3 players that haven't been hit by either of the dashes during this second phase. Perfect. I can absolutely pump on the boss. What you want to do here as well is make sure that you're always stood in the middle of the room, especially if you don't have any of the mechanics on you, as this is the safe spot. It's the point of all these markers on the room, it's the point of all the positioning, It's the point of absolutely everything. This room is symmetrical, and the middle is your safe haven. Stay in it. So, one more intermission up, and I have a health stone in all my defensives.
Fortifying brew innate.
I get hit instantly there, but I still hold my defenses because I know that I need them for the very end. I cannot pop them early. I'm allowed to fortifying brew now that I've used it, and I'm holding diffuse magic for the very last second. If I need to, I will health stone. So, now we get into the final thing, and once again, we're popping all of our cooldowns and going ham on the boss. It's the nice relaxing part. And we still have a touch of karma in case we get a dash coming up. Now, because we're killing these bosses so fast now, we're not going to see the whole fight. We're going to finish it before the next dashes come in. However, if you're progressing this boss, it'll be the exact same as the last two phases. Nothing changes. You play them the exact same way that you have before. The only difference is once you get into that final intermission, it's a hardened rage, and you need to kill the boss before it kills you. But as long as everybody's alive, you shouldn't even have to worry about that. Anyway, Ky'veza down. Let's have a look at that juicy single target damage then. Moving on to the penultimate boss. The Silken Court. Now these two are rather interesting, and it's a really fun encounter, as you get this mechanic where you're basically split into two groups, red and blue, for the entire time, and players from opposite groups cannot touch each other. So you're kind of playing this like a dance. It's a very synchronized fight. You'll know what I mean as I go through it. So in terms of talents, there are two main builds for this one actually, and you can go either or. Now, I went single target for this boss, and I would recommend going single target for this boss if you're really high item level, as the amount of damage that you do during the burst windows is really catered towards the single target build, especially if you're no longer progressing it and your kill times are a lot faster. However, for the longest amount of time, and especially during progress, I used the AoE build for this, and I found it a lot easier and I was a lot more comfortable on it. Predominantly because there are adds during this, it is a 2-target fight, so AoE is not too bad, and it does good damage. So, whatever your personal preference is what I'd go with for this fight. I personally went with single target. Now, just like with Ky'veza, I do have a list on the right-hand side here, which shows all of my cooldowns. I haven't got defensives on this list, because there's no real preset time for defensives. I'll run through when I do use defensives on this fight, but I haven't got them slotted in there. It's all about offensive cooldowns, and as you might notice, I don't pop Zuin until 39 seconds into the fight. And this is because this fight is entirely based around DPS windows. The bosses take increased damage after they use one of their major mechanics, and that's when you want to be using as much damage as possible. So I'm pretty confident in this timeline of when I use my abilities, and I recommend that you follow suit. They're all set at certain times for specific reasons, so I avoid deviating whenever possible. Right, let's get to it then. So, straight off the bat, I'm part of the red group, which means I will always stay with the red team for the entire fight. And you might notice, I'm not popping all of my cooldowns on full. This is the one boss fight where you don't, and that's because you want to be popping all of your major cooldowns during the burst windows that I just talked about. So as red team, you're going to have to do a lot more mechanics than blue team. If you can trick your raid leader into putting you on blue team, do. It makes life easier, and you're going to do more DPS. But if you're comfortable doing mechanics, stay on the red team. It's not so bad. So you can see that we have the webs here. I'm one of the webbers. After he charges, that's when it's going to be the big burst damage window. So what I'm doing is, whilst I'm getting into position with my web, I'm setting up my treacherous transmitter, I'm setting up Zuin, I'm setting up everything ready for the moment he lands his charge, and that's when I'll pop everything and go absolutely ham. Fixating with your Storm, Earth and Fire is extremely crucial here, and you need to be doing it on whichever boss you are targeting, especially as single target. You can see that I also held a flurry strikes for this. You want to try and get into the habit of doing that as well. I saw that I was one tiger farm off of a flurry strikes, so I held it until the boss was in his damage window. Depending on where the tool boss goes, that's where your next position will be. As he went on the left hand side, the red team moved first, and you can see that we're always set up in a position that we stay true to. It's the same position as we were at the very start of this fight, and it's now the same, where I'm always stood on the right hand side as I'm going to be the one taking a web. So you keep popping all your cooldowns, keep up the standard rotation, and you get ready for this next web. So I go and stand in it, and now I move over, getting ready to be the barrier between the boss and the wall. I also like to use Fortifying Brew here, as you are going to take extended damage over time compared to other players. So I Storm, Earth and Fire early here, and then the moment he charges in, I fixate it on him, and I absolutely go ham. You can see I held Flurry Strikes again, so that they all go into this boss, And I also use Karma on him during these windows, as you are taking damage after he's charged, and it'll be increased damage on the boss that you've Karma'd. So, we're in a really good position now, and now we're getting set up for the first intermission. Now, there's two ways you can do this intermission. The first way is to absolutely push the boss, and the other way is to hold damage. In progression, you're predominantly probably going to be holding damage here and trying to line up the timers so that you get to Lust at the end of the fight. As we've done this boss multiple times and we have a lot of damage, we're going for the push one, which is self-explanatory. We're pushing it as fast as possible, so then we can Lust just after this intermission. So when it comes to orbs, I haven't mentioned this, but you can now collect 4 and then you're fine. If you collect 5, you do die, but you can collect 4. And you don't have to rush this. They stay up for a long time. Don't panic too much. Just make sure that you are collecting them as a group and that you aren't letting them sit on the floor for the extended period of time. So now we're going to get gripped in. If you're the first group that gets gripped in, you go left and right. Second group goes straight through. So you can see we're left and right. I was always assigned to go left here. You will have an assignment, stick to it. It's incredibly important you get out as fast as possible as well. Otherwise, the other group's going to get pulled on top of you, and you're going to kill someone and yourself. So, now we're going for the Dispel mechanic, and this boss is ramping up in how much extra damage it's taking. So, we pop Lust here, and I pop all of my cooldowns, and I go absolutely ham. I make sure to fixate on this boss, because I'm fully single target, and you can see just how much damage I'm doing to it. Right now, it's in its 100% increased damage phase, and I'm just absolutely smacking this thing into oblivion. A cone's going to come out and you dodge it in the correct location, and then it's going to teleport. Based on where it teleports is where you position, and you'll have to get adjusted to this and learn how to do it. So, we were pulled second, so we go through the boss. You want to grab some orbs as you go through, but try not to roll through the entire group, because you never know how many are double stacked. And now we're up for a Dispel. So, I was Dispel 4, which means it's going to be in the middle of the room. The first 2 Dispels tend to be out the edge, and then the boss teleports to the middle, and you Dispel there. Now, what I like to do here is I use Diffuse Magic, so I Dispel myself. I don't have to rely on a healer to do it, and I can make sure that I get it in at the perfect time. We pop Storm, Earth, and Fire again, fixate on the big boss, and we just go absolutely nuts on it again. Keep smacking that boy, you're absolutely fine. Make sure that you're always sticking with your group. Don't stray too far. You should always know where the other team is. They'll always be opposite from you. And now we're going into the second intermission. And this is similar to the first intermission, where you're pushing damage as hard as possible, and you're always moving counterclockwise. Play safe in this intermission. These rings come in, and panicking is the worst thing you can do. If you have to go off the boss for a couple of seconds, that's absolutely fine. Always wait to see the spikes come out of the ground before you go back in. They can be a little bit delayed, and it will cause you to get stuck, and then you're pretty much screwed.
Cryptic instructions innate. Storm, Earth, and Fire innate.
I also like to really pop my cooldowns here because it's a lot of downtime here. The boss is not technically taking increased damage, but because I'm red team in phase 3, a lot of the mechanics are going to be on us to do, and we're going to have a lot of time when we're not actually hitting the bosses. So this is like almost the perfect window to get some final big damage in before we have to play mechanically. If you're a blue team enjoyer, it might not be the best time to use it, and you might be wanting to use it during an actual damage amp window. You'll see what I mean after we get grip. So, red team will get gripped and we move right. We do not break the webs here as we're blocking a charge. You'll be paired with a teammate and you guys need to stick together like blue. This is when I recommend using defensives. It's a really good time to do it. You're going to be taking a lot of additional damage. Now here, you feel like you want to hit that boss because he's taking a damage amp. You don't. This is all about positioning. It's all about mechanics. You move to that other boss as a red team member and you suck it up. It's a good time to pop a pot here, as well as a Storm, Earth, and Fire, and then just go ham on the boss. Touch of Death is also a good time to do now. And now, this set, you are breaking these webs. Now, as a Windwalker Monk, it makes sense for me to be the person that goes out as far as possible, because we're super mobile. Don't wait for the other person to do it. You can see I'm Dispel 2 here. So, that means I need to get this Dispel right. If you mess up Dispels, it's over. Run into the very center of the boss, Dispel yourself again, or call for a Dispel, whatever works. And now we're just going ham on the boss, and the boss is going to die during this because it's got its damage amp. Now, what would happen if you're on progress is this fight will continue for a little bit longer. And basically what will happen is there'll be another charge where you as a red team member will have to break it. And then there'll also be another dispel, and these will happen at the same time. They overlap each other, and that's when you would predominantly hero if you're progressing. So that's when you want to make sure you have a Zuin up. So you can see that I had one up there. I did Storm, Earth and Fire early here because I knew we weren't going to get to that part of the fight. But if we were getting to that part of the fight, I would have held Storm, Earth and Fire to make sure I had all my cooldowns at the exact same time at the end of the fight and finish it off perfectly. Now that crazy business is over, let's run through those damage numbers. Not bad, not bad. Okie dokie then. Let's move on to the final boss in this raid. Queen Ansurek. We're finally here. Now, you might notice off the bat, I got a rank 67 for this. Not quite as impressive as my other rankings across the board. Now, there's a few reasons for this, and you can call them excuses, but it's worth explaining regardless. I only have 30 pulls on this boss, and quite honestly, I'd only seen Phase 3 once. The first time I saw Phase 3 was the pull that we killed it. So yeah, there was a lot of learning on the spot. It's not the perfect kill from my perspective, and I questioned if I really wanted to put this in the video, but as it's a full raid guide, it kind of makes sense, and I'm really happy with how my P1 and P2 went. My P3, not so happy, but I can discuss that and talk about what I could have done differently and done and improved, and that's kind of the point of a guide, isn't it? So, in terms of talents, you're going to want to go AoE here. There is not really much variation in builds here at all. This is it. This is your cookie cutter. Progression or re-clearing, this is really the build you want to be going for this fight. Looking at the right hand side here, do not be alarmed. It is an extremely long list of things that you need to do, but that's because I've included a lot of things onto it. I've got Tiger's Lust there for the mechanic that we need to get out of. I've got Touch of Karmas, I've got Diffuse Magics, I've got Fortifying Brew. On top of that, I've got all my offensive cooldowns. But because I haven't reached P3 of this fight, I hadn't optimized my timers here. So actually, I'm going to blur out all of the timers that I'm not happy with sharing with you guys because I don't think they fit with a fight, especially based on what mechanics you get at what times. It changes how your cooldowns work here. So the timers that I am happy with sharing, I'll leave up. Otherwise, I'm going to blur out the rest of these because they just aren't right. Here you can see me actually changing my timers as we're pulling the boss. I'm still trying to get a grip on when best to use cooldowns here as I'd only pulled this boss 30 times. Anyway, let's get into it. So let's talk about this opener. Basically, we want to karma and pull. One, because you're going to take a huge amount of damage that you don't want to deal with. But two, you want karma back up for a certain time in the fight, and to get that up at the perfect time, you have to karma now. We're also going to choose the standard single target opener on this boss, nothing too fancy. And you want to stand behind the line here, as a rule of thumb. The moment this liquefy comes in, move. You cannot get hit by these green swirlies, you will instantly die. Now, you see Tiger's Lust timers coming in. It's because every time this mechanic comes in, you need to lust yourself and then move again. This fight is about constant moving, dodging, and making sure you have cooldowns up at the perfect times. Throughout the fight, players will get these swirlies on them. You'll be assigned to a circle, and that's the circle you have to go in. One player will be assigned to pop. I was not a popper. Now's the perfect time to pop another Storm, Earth, and Fire, because there's a lot of downtime here. I say dime time, there's a hell of a lot going on. But it's the best time to use it, because then you can also use Strike of the Windlord and all your other major cooldowns that you have up. So it's a really nice time to do it. Now we're going to get this again, and I'm going to Tiger's Lust myself again. Here I've got a teammate that can't get out, that we have targeted. So I'm going to make sure I focus him down and get a touch of death out on him. That way I can do more damage on Ansurek as well. So it kind of works in my favor a little bit, without a homie falling. So a little bit more downtime here, kind of a bit relaxing in this chaotic fight. And so what you want to do here is you want to be basing these webs on the left-hand side so that the people that have to place the toxin can place them safely. Because I'm the closest player to the edge, I put mine here, regardless of the color on top of my head. Then I stand inside my assigned swirly and get knocked up. Here, I pop Fortifying Brew because there's a hell of a lot of damage coming out. And you need to be completely focused on moving. If you get hit by a single one of these green waves, you're dead. Now it's time to use Karma as well. The main reason for using Karma here is because you're going to take a lot of damage. The cooldowns just come off cooldown. And it's just extra damage onto the boss, so it's nice. Once again, another Tiger's Lust. And then we want to help your homie get out, so I Fist of Fury in his direction and move out. And now we're going to use our second set of major cooldowns. There's a fair bit of downtime here, so it's the perfect time to ramp in some damage whilst we can. So all the cooldowns popped, and now we're basing again. You bait the bombs first, so you put them in the location, and then you all move onto the other side of Ansurek, so that the web lines are not on top of them, and then you get into position ready for the knock-up. You have to do this all really, really quickly. There's no messing about. There's no time for skiving. This is a fast-paced fight that you need to be on top of. So we're now going into the intermission, and we're just playing it chill here. We've got defensive up, but we are going to use our defensives at certain times. It's quite crucial that you do this. So we're getting pulled in a few seconds. Double roll back always does the trick. And make sure you vivify yourself during this as well. There's a lot of damage coming out. Your healers have to heal everybody. We Storm, Earth and Fire again here. It's a good idea to do this now because the cooldown's off cooldown. And you need to get this shield down as fast as possible. So we nuke the boss and we're going to get pulled in again. Double roll again. This time I use Diffuse Magic to negate the damage. So you can see each time a massive amount of damage is coming in on this fight, you're trying to negate it in some way or another. And now it's just dodging webs, getting the shield down, and getting ready to go to our sides. So I initially start as a left-sider. You want to take out this ad here, make sure your tank gets aggro, and avoid these orbs. These orbs are going to one-shot you if you get hit. Trust me, I know all about that. Now, interestingly enough, I wouldn't touch a death here if you know that on the second platform you're going to get to use all your cooldowns. But because of portal assignments, these things over here, I don't get to use my cooldowns on the second platform, which kind of throws everything out of balance a little bit. It'll make more sense when it comes up. So right now we're doing damage here, and I do pop Storm, Earth and Fire. I don't advise popping Storm, Earth and Fire here, but for me it makes sense, just because of when I have to do a mechanic. I touch a Karma just to add a little bit more damage and protect myself, and now I got the ramp. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there's a timer with my name on it. I need to get inside of this portal ASAP. It reset itself for the platform, but I need to get in at 5 seconds, and I'm getting pulled back. I panic a little bit here, but I managed to get in at 4, and you need to move to the left as soon as possible and pop a defensive. I didn't have a defensive, not the end of the world, but if you don't move to the left-hand side and you drop that circle on top of the portal, the next player going in is not going to be your best friend. So you can see there's a lot of downtime here for me, but now I have my cooldowns up that I didn't use on this platform, and I'm going to use them in preparation for this next platform. So I pop all my cooldowns here and target the ads. I probably don't want them on top of me, but because I'm doing so much damage here, they're just absolutely going ham at me. Leg sweep here, but now we're interrupting the mini-boss. Make sure you dodge orbs, get everything down, and now you're going to P3.
Collect or stand in circle.
This was the first time I saw P3, so I'm in for a treat. I don't have any cooldowns up. What would be happening is if you were able to use your cooldowns on the second platform that we'd like to, you would have Zune about to come up and you'd have a Storm, Earth and Fire, which you would be using on this first set of ads that are about to come up. I don't get that luxury, unfortunately. It's not the end of the world. I've been given the mechanics to do. You suck it up and you do it. So ads are coming in, and now this is when you want to ring a piece. We have a Brewmaster Monk, so he ring a pieces first to stop the ads going in at the perfect location, so they're just outside and you can AoE them as well. Strike of the Windlord's good to get off here, and then I do a second ring a piece just to make sure that the ads don't go in on top of that. Hey, and they say monks aren't good for nothing. So now we're dodging webs, and you want to do this carefully. You want to make sure that you're always being careful here. If you get hit by anything, you're pretty much dead. And now it's time to run back on the boss. I don't play this phase perfectly at all. I'm all over the place. I'm focusing on survival right now, and all my cooldowns are coming up. But I know that there's going to be another ad phase coming in, so what I do instead is I hold my cooldown, I hold Storm, Earth and Fire here, getting ready. Now this is important, the portal. I transcendenced here, so like a mage, I can blink over here without getting a debuff on me. Really useful if you're a monk and you really want to be doing this. You can do it twice or 3 times during the fight, depending on how many portals you have to take. So now it's basically rinse and repeat. You're doing the exact same thing. Boss in the corner, some ring of pieces down, and big AoE damage. This time I have cooldowns. I'm
Collect
gonna
or stand in
pump.
circle.
So pop everything and go absolutely ham. Make sure you're focusing Ansurek. She is your main target. You want this beast down, don't you? You want that CE. So now shackles are coming in, and you need to go to a prefix position if you don't have shackles. Everybody inside the AMZ, pop a defensive if you have one. It's worth it, and then just
Storm,
keep going.
Earth, and fire innate.
So I have another Storm, Earth, and Fire. So what do I do here? I do pop it because I know I'm not going to get a no Zuin. I can see the boss's health. I see that she's about to die. So I know that I want to pop this now to try and get some damage on these ads as we're going around the room. So, all well. It's all looking good here. We're going to have about one more portal to go through. And this boss is going down. My first kill. I'm so excited.
Fortify
And then,
innate.
what do? I Whirling Dragon Punch at the completely wrong time. I don't see the orb coming in. And I get one shot. I die within the last 15 seconds of this boss. It's rather embarrassing. And it was another reason why I contemplated not posting this video. But as you can see, if we continue this fight going on, it's rinse and repeat. We're not going to get another portal. You take the boss to the edge again. Ads are going to come in. But because we do so much damage, we don't really have to worry about that too much. We are going to get the ad set, but we're mostly focusing on the boss, forgetting about the ads, and nuking it down. If you are progressing this and have less DPS, you're probably going to get this ad set. You're going to get another set of portals, and it's going to be a bit more hectic. But the fight shouldn't go on for too much longer than it already has. So yeah, not the greatest way to end the Ansurek kill, is it? I was disappointed in myself because, you know, I really like to play as best as I can, so dying at the very end of that fight there to something as stupid as a Whirling Dragon Punch does my head in. But that was the first time I saw that phase, so whatever helps me sleep at night. So yeah, let's have a look at the damage breakdown of Ansurek. And yeah, well, that's it. That wraps up my entire raid boss guide. Thank you for watching. I hope that this guide helps you, whether you're progressing on one of the later bosses and really struggling with what to do, or you're re-clearing and just want to optimize your damage, or maybe you're about to do your first Ulgrax Mythic and you want to make sure you're doing everything right to get that kill. I hope that I've helped you here. If you have any questions, feel free to write me in the comments and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, I appreciate you all watching up to the end. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.